Hi everybody, it's Steve Halley here from the Family Peace Initiative, and welcome to the April edition of the Facilitators Tool Chest blog. Today I want to talk with you about two important pieces of battering intervention programming that are not commonly talked about but deserve much more airtime than they're getting. And I really started thinking about this after listening to Dr. Natalie Hoskins do an amazing presentation on battering intervention and trauma, what the research says. And she really laid out a very good argument that the socialization of boys is an abusive experience. And she says one of the outcomes, or two of the outcomes of our current socialization of boys is a lack of perceived supports from those around us. We socialize our boys into learning how to be independent, learning how to take care of things themselves, learning how to not ask for help. That's not necessarily new. I still struggle with stopping to ask for directions when I think I can surely drive around the city and finally find where I'm going without having to submit myself to asking for directions. But she talks about that the lack of perceived social supports is a product of socialization. And we hear that in our programs. We hear it in our classes. The men, when they complete our program, will say things like, the most important thing I learned was that I'm not alone, I'm not weird, my story isn't strange, that there's others who share my experience, that we are together, we understand each other. A growing collection of social supports. A second product of the male socialization that Dr. Hoskins talked about was the restricted emotional expression. And restricted emotional expression is pretty interesting how it works its way down the road, because when she says there's research out there to support that males are maybe even more emotionally expressive when they're born and in their early months than females. And our culture, our society, our families have a real fast way to correct that, so that by the time kids are in kindergarten and first grade, by the time they're very young, they've already learned, don't be a baby, don't be a pussy, don't be weak, don't be soft, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about. And so what has to happen is that they restrict their emotional expression. And so I've been thinking a lot about these two components of male socialization and how they play out in battering intervention. And I've had the privilege of sitting in, thanks to the wonders of Zoom, to programs around the area who are online. And I've sat in with Jim Henderson, with Jeffrey Cape, and we've been listening to the trainings of Men Stopping Violence and listening to the words of Lisa Nitch and the House of Ruth about what those programs are doing to create more social supports. And not only social supports, but perceived social supports, to where the person perceives that the support is there. Right? The supports are not necessarily valuable if the person doesn't perceive it. But once people perceive that there's support, that does a lot to stabilize a human being. And I've been watching how they do that, how they are encouraging group members to help each other with assignments, while they're teaching group members to work through the processes with other group members, encouraging them to get together outside of group time. I believe Jim Henderson even creates a phone list and requires people to call each other during the week, trying to promote connection, peer support, perceived social supports. And we've been looking at, look at these people doing such a beautiful job of creating these supports, and how can we improve what we're doing so that we might be able to see those similar outcomes in our program. And so now the Family Peace Initiative is really playing around with how do we create more social supports within the group structure of the program that we're doing. And we're identifying a number of ways where we can improve and make things happen. We're excited about that. The other area that Dr. Hoskins talked about was the restricted emotional expression. And that's less talked about in battery intervention overall. I think to some degree that there might be a fear about incorporating an affective component into a battery intervention program. But Dr. Natalie Hoskins says that restricted emotional expression is a serious problem, that the restricted emotional expression leads to aggression. It leads to addictions. It leads to self-harming behaviors. Because on a simplified approach, if I'm sad, if my grandmother has passed away and I'm feeling sad, and I don't know how to cope with feeling sad at that level of intensity, then I have to do something to make those feelings go away. I have to do something to get away from them, to suppress them, to ignore them, or give them away to somebody else. And that leads to all kinds of dangerous things, either for myself or for those that I want to give it away to. And so, and I believe we see restricted emotional expression constantly in our group room, starting with our check-in. Hey, say your name, how you're feeling. Let's stay with mad, sad, glad, and afraid. And then something else that we add to the check-in. But people can't even say the words. Hi, I'm Bob, and I'm feeling good. Well, how about emotionally? How are you feeling? Mad, sad, glad, or afraid? I'm fine. I'm good. I'm cool. I'm all right. It's hard for them to even say the words. It's been so socialized in normal male socialization, and the contributions of the river of cruelty to this whole thing creates a inept ability for people to begin to even notice and process and cope with their emotional experiences. And so that restricted emotional expression is something that we can combat. We can offer an antidote to. We can re-educate people on their ability to notice, experience, recognize, and express appropriately and accurately what they're feeling. Now, we do that in a lot of ways, but Dr. Bruce Perry, in his book with Oprah Winfrey, they talked about, the title of the book is What Happened to You? And they talk about this need to learn how to regulate, how to self-soothe ourselves. And we do that through relationship. It's something that we do in relationship with others. When we're young, as babies, we learn how to self-soothe through our caretaker, whether it's through our mother, whether it's through our father, whether it's through those who are caring for us. They put their faces close to us when we're screaming and crying, and they hum to us, and they sing to us, and they rock us, and they're holding us and touching us, caressing us, helping us learn to soothe ourselves when we're emotionally dysregulated. In male socialization, there isn't hey, let's learn how to self-soothe. And so what Dr. Perry says is that in order to learn how to self-soothe, you have to be dysregulated. You can't explain on a chart, this is how a person needs to self-soothe. It has to be experienced, much like swimming, right? I can explain to you how to swim, until the cows come home, but when you jump into a pool, you are not going to swim unless you have practice, unless you've gotten in the pool before, unless you have maybe had some instruction in the area. Just going over it on an outline form is not going to produce a swimmer. And talking to somebody about self-soothing is not going to help them learn to self-soothe when they're dysregulated. And so we can do that in our programs. We can create processes that will dysregulate people, right? Because we know that people are afraid of public speaking. So just asking someone to give a presentation will dysregulate them. And then we can ask them to notice what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. We can ask them to rate it. How intense is that feeling between 1 through 10? And if they say an 8, we can say, great, now just notice how long that stays an 8, because it will probably decline over time, and pretty soon you'll be back to regulated. Just notice how much time that takes. So simply asking someone to give a presentation on domestic violence, on their behavior and relationships, on what we do, our week 18 process, where we're asking people to really up their accountability, that dysregulates. They get anxious for several weeks, and we can help them to learn how to regulate and manage emotional experiences. There's lots of ways to do it, and it all starts in our program with Mad, Sad, Glad, and Afraid, and asking people to notice when they're feeling emotional activation. Because really what we say is that not feeling is weird, right? It is evidence of restricted emotional expression, because the human being is wired to have emotions, sometimes intensely, regarding events. And if we're not noticing them, that's evidence of something amiss. Right? So I would encourage you to look at both, how do you establish peer social supports? How do you help your participants to recognize the perceived social supports that they have in the room? Can they grow that group with them? And I would also ask you to think about, how are you addressing restricted emotional expression? Right? And what would happen if you were able to help somebody more comfortably express Mad, Sad, Glad, and Afraid? How much aggression, violence, harm, cruelty that people are using in families would decrease with just the ability to know ourselves better. So thank you so much for listening today. I appreciate your time. And I would like to reward you for getting to the end of this little video presentation. And so I have this football here that we use to teach emotional expression. And I would love if you know how we use a football to address restricted emotional expression, please give us a call or email me at steveh@familypeaceinitiative.com. And the first person who responds with how we use this football to teach restricted emotional expression and how to expand that, we'll give you a free Family Peace Initiative t-shirt. So, which I'm sure is on your bucket list of things you'd like to own before the end of your battery intervention days. So we thought we'd help you out. So look forward to seeing you next month, you guys. Thank you so much for the work that you do, and we'll talk to you soon.